All right, we are live. So, welcome everyone. This is your daily hit. I am Adam Jewell. Just a reminder if you haven't, like, follow, share, text this to your friends, to your relatives, let them see what's going on. We are live today, and I have Mr. Ken Miller, my father in law, sitting down with me, and we're just going to talk some general life conversation about Ken's trials and tribulations, as we named it, or he named it, I should say. So, Ken, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
You as well, and again, thanks for joining me today, especially on short notice. I know I just called you about 20 minutes ago and asked you if you wanted to come down here and do this, but thank you. It's gonna be a fun conversation. It'll be a fun ride here. We're set up in the bunker, as I call it, out in the country. Secure location no one knows about. Um, but it'll be fun today. We'll have a good time. So, Ken, you want to introduce yourself to everyone, let everyone know who you are, give a little bit of background of yourself?
Absolutely. I don't know where to begin. I could begin at day one. That'd be a long time ago.
Let's start from the beginning.
I was born in Greenfield, Wisconsin. Lived in Wisconsin all my life, except for when I was in the military. Graduated from high school in Greenfield. Went on to get an associate degree at Milwaukee School of Engineering in architectural engineering. And went on after that to start my own endeavor back in 1977. And I haven't looked back since, and I haven't worked for anybody else since then. So it's been quite a while. I don't know what it is. 47 years. It's crazy.
And how old are you right now?
71.
71. All right. For those of you who don't know, which is probably all of you, Ken is my father-in-law, so I'm married to one of his daughters. Ken, why don't you tell us a little bit about your family life?
Well, I don't know why you picked the one you did, but I'm glad you did. Sarah's the youngest. We have three biological daughters, and my wife and I have partially raised 8 foster kids. And we're still married after 46 years. And it's been a good ride. I was fortunate to pretty much quit. The daughters kind of run the whole business. So I was able to quit when I was 52, and that's been very good. Been busy with grandchildren. I guess I forgot about the other 2 daughters. Shayna is the middle daughter, and she works with the business as well. And Heidi is our oldest daughter. Excuse me, and she works with the business. So the 3 girls and myself, even though I only work maybe a couple hours a week, pretty much run the whole thing. And what we do is we design, build, and own apartments. And so they pretty much manage them after they're built. And we'll keep them for 10 to 15 years until the carpeting and different things need to be replaced. And then we'll sell them or keep them. We don't really care if we keep them or not. I've built 4,500 units in 4 states, being Colorado, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois.
So how'd you get started in the real estate business, just in general?
Well, I really owe a lot of thanks to my ex-brother-in-law, who is now deceased. When he knew that I was going to school for architecture, he called me up and said, "The next time you have a day off, we need to hang out together. And I'll show you what I do, and you can see how it works." And he did, and I did, and we did. And it was kind of a deciding day when I decided I was going to not sit in an office and do architectural work, because I just wasn't made for that. And so he showed me what I could do and work outside 90% of the time and expedite homes and design homes in the buildings in the office, and then go out and actually build them. And it was a great day, and I've thanked him for it many times.
So did you do office work for a while?
No, I started right out of college in 1977, and went into business building houses for 14 years. And then after that, we got into multifamily.
So for how many? Well, let's see. So you have an associate's in
Correct.
engineering. Did you get your bachelor's?
No,
Okay. And right out of MSOE, Milwaukee School of Engineering, you were working as an architect, and then it was your brother-in-law, you said.
correct.
Okay, I didn't know that. Interesting. So you said 4,500 units, and you started with homes, so you kind of played the game of Monopoly, if I'm hearing that correctly.
Correct, absolutely.
And throughout your life, throughout your career, I mean, you built the empire. You talked about the girls kind of running it now. Can you just walk us through the progression of what building that empire meant?
Well, it was interesting because what I did was at first, after I sold the single family business to one of my employees, and then I went on to build condos, multifamily condos as well as multifamily apartments. And a very good associate, I guess you'd call him, the president of one of the local banks, said to me, if I built 3 units and sold 2 and kept 1, he would fund pretty much anything I wanted to build. So he and I progressed forward, and after about 10 years of doing that, then I switched it around and we built 3 and kept 2 and rented. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, we built 3 and we kept 2 and sold 1. And that was the basic format that everything was started with. So we would always have money in hand for kids' schooling and clothing, vehicles, whatever the typical spending things that people do. And then as time went on, that 1 unit and those 2 units began to accumulate, and it became quite apparent that we had to figure out what we were going to do with them. And so then we started a company that does apartment management. And we pretty much do our own buildings. We presently have some units that belong to people that we know, and we manage them on their behalf as well. And so it doesn't take long. I mean, if you're doing this for 47 years, every 10 years you accumulate more and more apartments. And so that was true, and it still is true today.
So let's back up for just a second and let me ask the question of when you got out of school and you had your engineering architectural background. Your brother-in-law introduced you to this. You didn't have any money at that point, right? I mean, you grew up from a pretty middle-class family, I would say.
Very.
You want to just give us a background on your family, your mother and father, what they did, and then kind of how you started, I'll say, that empire with pretty much, little to nothing?
Exactly. My mother was a homemaker, and my father was a truck driver, worked for Borden's Dairy for 32 years. And when he retired, which was right around 1977, was the time that I started. So he would come to the different job sites and help me clean them up, and we kind of worked integrally together, and it was a great time. I enjoyed my dad. I forgot what the other question you said was. Oh, how it evolved. I drove a dump truck when I was in college, and I saved up as much money as I could. So when I started in 1977, I had a total net worth in cash available of $11,000. And I went to one of the local bankers, and they denied me because I wasn't worth anything. And then that's when this other guy stepped in and was willing to finance the first building, which is always the hardest one. When you need money, you can't get it. And when you don't need it, it's plentiful.
What year was that?
1977.
1977. So in 77, you had $11,000 net worth. You went to a bank, they denied you. Why did the other bank approve?
I think the major answer, the real answer would be while I was driving that dump truck for the 6 years and going through college, I was saving my paychecks or my money in their bank. So I trusted them with my money as I was growing. And they just said it was time for them to reciprocate. And that's why they were willing to do the first one.
And how much of a loan, so to say, did you get for that first time?
I think about 90,000, I think. But that's been so long, I don't remember.
Yeah. So the 90,000 then helped you finance the first 5 homes. Is that
First
accurate?
one.
First one home.
Right.
So you built the one home, sold it immediately. Were you still living at home with your parents at that point, or?
That's a good question. No, I don't think so. No, not in 77. Because we were married in 78.
Okay, so you probably had your own house or apartment or something.
It was just a small country rental.
Oh, okay, got it. And the reason I ask is because I know that we've talked before about how with some of these you'd build 5, live in 1, sell 4, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. It was that was the next era, I guess you'd say. In 1978 and in 79, then I built another one building and sold that as well. And I didn't really build the first apartment until, I couldn't even tell you, probably somewhere around 1985 or 86 or something like that. So I was building just one house, then I'd sell it, then I'd build 2 houses, and we would live in one of them and use it as a model, even as we lived there. And then the real push came in 1980 when President Reagan was elected. Pretty much the whole business went into the toilet for several years, actually. And it was very difficult to get money, to get decent loans, if not any. I'm sorry, if you got a loan, it probably wasn't very easy to get, and the amount of money that you got was pretty minimal. And what they did was they would have me buy down interest rates for customers that I had so that I could actually stay in business. And it was quite unique. In 1980, we had our first child, Heidi, and she was born on September 11th, and on September 22nd, some kids were a little disgruntled at the fact that the subdivision was built in their little area, and they burned our house down. So we went from having a child, my wife quitting her job, to a week and a half later, the kids burned it down, and we rebuilt it and opened it for the first time in December.
Wow.
So it was quite a tumultuous time, to say the least.
Yeah.
And we built it back on the same foundation. And that particular model was the first one of its kind in Wisconsin. It was referred to as a solar envelope home. And what that basically means is it's a house within a house. There's double walls, and there's about a foot distance between them. And then there's a greenhouse solarium on the south side that creates heat that's allowed to envelop around the house. And it's very efficient, basically. We had, I think it was about 2,200 square feet. And we were able to heat that for about $150 a year total.
Wow.
And so that was the start of that. And we went from building 4 houses in 1980 to building 25 in 1981. So things really exploded quickly.
So just to back up, you're talking a whole 1980. You started in 77. That was 1980. 81 is when it really exploded, like you said.
Right.
When you first started in 77 and you got the one loan for $90,000 from the bank, 11 grand to your name, I mean, you had to invest the majority of that money into building the house rather than living off of it. How did you live? How did you make ends meet?
It's a good question. I owe it all to my wife. She was the sole breadwinner for the first 3 years of our marriage. And when they burned the house down, that didn't help matters any, because I had minimum amount of work, and she had none because she was taking care of the baby. And we just stuck with it and worked harder and paid the bills, and that was kind of the end of it. Or the beginning, I should say, really.
Right. It was so your wife, her name is Bobby, for those of you that don't know. What did she do for those years
Before she quit,
as a job?
yeah, she was a physical therapist.
Oh, is that right?
Yep. And so she was absolutely the soul. She had a Honda 250 motorcycle that I would use for driving around the city to expedite. So I burned a minimal amount of gas. And we just tried to conserve as much as we could. And we made it through.
Well, so that was probably, what, at least 3 to 4 years. Oops, got a phone call coming in. Is your daughter? So that was probably 3 to 4 years kind of, well, that's more of a question. 3 to 4 years of living humbly / even in poverty. Is that kind of a correct statement?
Well, certainly humble would be true, but it wasn't poverty looking. The
Yeah.
house that we built was, I think I said, at 2,200 square feet. It was all landscaped. It was very nice. It was completed, completely done. And we had 16,000 people in 18 months come through that house.
The very first one you built?
Yep, the very first solar envelope.
Oh, solar envelope. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was extremely extremely sought after. And that was really a good start or a good bouncing board or whatever you want to call it
Right.
toward the future. And in the next few years after that, I built about 20 or 25 houses a year. And that certainly kept us going good. And by 1986 or thereabouts, I built my first multifamily on behalf of another guy that I knew. He hired me to do it, and we finished that up. Then I sold 2 more 8 families. We built those, and so between 1982 and 86 was probably the biggest boom that we've had. I mean, I was one of the bigger builders in the city, actually, is really what it amounted to, even though that wasn't one of my goals. My real goal was to build less and make more. And I guess ultimately I did that pretty well. So after I built those first 3 8 families, then is when I made the deal with the banker that we could build stuff on our own and not build it with other people. And that's really been the greatest thing. So since 1986 or 87 or 88, I don't remember exactly, I concentrated more on multi than I did on singles. And by the time 1992 came along, I sold the business to one of my employees. And then I strictly built multi, didn't build any more single families. So from 1992 till present, that's all we've done is apartments and condos.
So, for anyone that is watching, feel free to drop a question in the chat, either on Twitch or on TikTok. We are live, so feel free to drop a question in there. Ken has amassed a very large, I guess, amount of wealth for himself and for his family over the years. I just find it incredibly interesting that what kicked it all off was that first, $90,000 loan. I mean, how much did you make on your very first house that you got that $90,000 loan? Do you remember? Was it more of it wasn't about making money, it was about proving yourself?
Yeah, that would be accurate. Actually, I don't know that I made much money at all. I don't really remember. The good news was that until 1980, we were able to live on what Bobby made as income. And if anybody ever would try and figure out how to start a business, it's extremely difficult if you have to make money. Whereas I was lucky for the first 3 years I was in business. I didn't have to make money because she did. And your mentality changes 360 degrees. I mean, it's totally awesome to be able to do something and not need to do it, because then things become a lot easier and you can make better decisions, I believe, just based on the fact that you don't have a gun to your head.
Right. And then, like you said, Bobby quit in 80 when the house burned down.
Yep.
When the house was burned down. That was when you had Heidi, your first daughter.
Yep.
2 years later, you're doing 25 houses a year. I mean, how from 80 to 81 did you go from 4 or 5 houses to 25 houses in 1 year?
And just worked harder, more hours.
I mean, what was your role in doing that?
I did everything. I expedited them, which means basically I lined up to make sure that the right contractors were there in the order in which they needed to be to accomplish building the house. And that I did myself. I did a lot of the designs myself. Just did a lot of things by myself.
Did you, for those watching, did you, were you out there with the hammer? Were you doing physical
Somewhat.
work?
Yep.
Yeah.
Not a lot. I did that on a few of the houses. And then the carpenters kiddingly, I think they were kidding, they said, if we work and build these houses, we'll charge you X, we'll charge you $8,000. And if you help us, we'll charge you $9,000. And my whole goal was to get the cost down. And so I would just do it with them and save some money and just stay more involved.
So again, for those watching, on on kind of a personal level, what would you tell any young people? Well, not even young people, even people my age, which is mid-age, 40 years old, people starting a business that, I mean, for you, you said it, it took three years to really start. What would you tell people is the key to doing that?
The key, find your basic people that you need. You need an accountant, you need an attorney, you need a banker. They always say you need an administrator, which is probably true too. And just stay focused on whatever your plan is. But make sure that before you get started, you actually have a plan. What are you going to do? How are you going to achieve it? What's your goal for this year? What's your goal for next year? And to just kind of do common sense things and figuring out what you can do. How many hours in a day? We had a fresh new family. You got to be there with them. They need money to live. It can be a very complicated, cumbersome time. But as long as you stay organized, I think you'd be surprised as to how beneficial and how easy it can be.
And when you say organized, what did your organization look like then? When really when you went from 4 to 25, because that had to be the most chaotic part of this journey or one of the most chaotic parts of this journey that you're talking about. I mean, is that your organization set up the team?
Well, that's what it became in time, because I was able to hire someone to help me out after about, I would say it was maybe 4 years, maybe not quite that long. But the problem with hiring employees too soon is that depending on their knowledge level, you may have to spend more time with them than you realize that you could have just stayed by yourself. And I always had a theory that I was going to keep it small and keep it all. And that worked fine until we got to be too big. But I can still tell you that it was much easier when I was by myself. Even though I had to work longer hours and make different decisions on my own, I didn't have to talk to anybody and bounce off things that I thought may be beneficial. And not everything that I did worked out. I mean, plus you always want to hear the good things. But there was other ones that didn't work out quite as well, especially in bidding. Bidding was a very difficult process when you're alone, because you got to get the plans. Nowadays, it's totally different because there's so many computerized things. But I had to actually hand deliver plans and surveys and draws on the buildings. I had to do all that at night, and then I would deliver them the next day. Building permits used to take probably a week or two, and you had to follow up with everything on your own. Nowadays, they just do it with a stroke of the computer.
So that was kind of more of the expediting that you were
Correct.
talking about. I mean,
Right.
just running around, ensuring things are getting done when they needed to be getting done. And,
Yep.
Make things move, essentially.
Yeah, in the right order, which is difficult because you can't put the cart before the horse. It just doesn't work. And if you get the carpenter there before the mason's ready, it just you'd be running in circles and going nowhere.
What else is different nowadays compared to then? I mean, do you think you could do the same thing of going to the bank, getting a loan, building a house? I mean, $11,000 in is probably 30 grand today or something to that effect. Who knows?
Yeah, probably at least.
Um,
Yeah, you could still do the same thing.
yeah.
The numbers would be greater. Everything is certainly a lot more expensive now than it was 40 years ago.
What were interest rates then?
1980, they were 18%.
18%. And so I just have the, maybe it's the times, but it seems as though if someone were to try to do that now with the interest rates as well as how strict banks are, it seems like it just wouldn't even be possible. I mean, is that?
Well, we're kind of in a perfect storm right now with higher interest rates than what anybody's been accustomed to, especially people your age. And the cost of materials and contracting and labor, everything is extremely high. And so it becomes difficult to do what you're saying. You still can do it, but you'll be putting in a lot more time on your own probably, I would guess. And you have to be happier with making less on the general contracting fee, and you're going to be making less. If you're building apartments, you may only break even. You might not have any cash flow. And realistically, that's not the worst thing in the world, as long as you have some means of income, whether it's previous things you did or your wife or your spouse. Because if you have no cash flow, but you're still making money or you're paying your monthly interest and you're paying down principal, the building is going up in value, you can depreciate the building. There's still benefits to owning real estate besides just overall cash flow. Everybody wants to think of only the cash flow because they want the money that they intend to make immediately. We're in an era now where everything's immediate. And, I got lucky because I lived this long. If I died when I was 40, it means I worked a lot for nothing. But that's been a good benefit. So it's still possible. It's just not going to have the formula won't look the same as when I started.
Right.
It's interesting, and I should point this out. We went from a time when you could build a building for, let's say, $500,000, and it would only cost you $490. There was a time when I was making money on building our own apartments that we owned with the bank's money once the interest rates started to go down, where I would actually walk out of the bank with the loan intact and enough money for me to put some in my pocket before I even started the building. We haven't seen that for 20 years. Now, when you want to build the same $500,000 building, you better be ready to give them a check for $100,000 as a down payment, and then the other money, $400,000, would be used for the building of the building. So it completely flipped.
So you're saying there was a time where they were just giving you more than what you needed. I mean,
Exactly.
enough to make money and live off of it, and to, and for the costs.
Exactly. And nothing down.
And around what years were that?
Well, that's a good question.
Was that in like the 85-ish?
No, I think it was probably more like 90.
Or 90s?
I'm just guessing, though. I don't really remember. Yeah, it had to be close to there. Maybe it was even 92.
So that was the Bush administration.
Yeah, Reagan was until 88. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the time he got out, it was good.
By the time Reagan got out?
Yep.
And do you think that was due to, Reaganomics?
I do. It was a very difficult pill to swallow back then because his theories of Reaganomics was he pretty much had to bring everybody to their knees and end this high interest rate. And so if you didn't have something behind you or a willingness to work, you were in trouble. I mean, it was difficult to love the guy, but after it was all over, he solved the problem.
So you, switching topics a little bit, but, similar note, you are currently a Republican. Is that?
Yeah, I'm not
correct
registered.
statement? Not registered, but okay. And have you always been?
Pretty much. I would call myself either an independent. I mean, I haven't really stuck with following exact lines. A perfect example is that we had a senator here in Wisconsin by the name of Bill Proxmire. Unbelievable guy. If we had 535 of those today, we wouldn't be in trouble. And he was a Democrat. I'd vote for him to be president if he wanted to be. He just had wisdom that's actually very similar to the to Elon and his partner. I don't know how you pronounce his name, but their goal was the same as his. He's the one that found the $700 hammer back 30 years ago,
Okay.
and he had him called. It was called the Fickle Finger of Fate Award, and he would actually give people, I think, a walnut plaque to put on their wall. They probably didn't because it was a pretty negative thing. They won that week or that month that they had the most wasteful piece of equipment that anybody could buy.
Really?
He was unbelievable. He used to ride his bicycle in Washington, D.C. to the Capitol. He would spend $0 on getting reelected. He would go to the Brewers game and shake hands until his hands were about ready to bleed, I think. He'd go to the state fair. He would go to wherever he could find a high concentrate of people and just shake hands. Never advertised, didn't get any free money from somebody else. He owed nobody. I think the point of that was that I'd vote for a Democrat if it was the right one.
Right. And have you? Let's see. Have you remained? Have you went towards the Republican side the majority of your life on almost all issues? I know you say you're an independent, but are there particular things that you would say you're more of a Democrat on?
I'd say that same answer would be better if it was based on Republican things. I can't think of. I'm sure there's some out there, that would cause me to vote more liberal. I just can't. I can't think of anything at this point.
What was your take on this year's election with Trump and Kamala?
Well, I think the results are fabulous. I don't think that she could lead a horse to water, whereas Trump, he showed us 4 years ago that if he says it, he'll do it if he can. The biggest problem is, can he do everything that he would like to do to bring the country back to being profitable and more amiable for the general public? Up until he was elected, he's not even in office yet. I mean, there was people. It was a very terrible time, and the envelope of optimism is out here now. It's hard to even describe how it is. People's attitude is like totally different than it was 3 weeks ago, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, that's definitely true. At least half the country's
Yeah,
attitude.
right? Exactly.
With the real estate industry and your career spanning on 50 years, what are the real impacts from president to president on the real estate industry, or what have you observed?
Well, that's a good question too. They're somewhat controlling of interest rates in the Fed, but they're not totally in control of that. You could almost say that they're somewhat in control of a wide variety of things that Trump is going to try to get through, but we're not sure if he's going to make it with it. It all depends on the backing he gets, and if they get a couple of people that drop out or die in Congress. I'm trying to think of the word. It's regulations that they can actually control probably more than anything, and the regulations and I'm trying to think of some of these words that I can't think of right now.
It's like the red tape of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't know what the fees are up to now because I haven't built anything that I've been in charge of for years, but they call them impact fees. It's like legalized stealing. When you want to go in and build an 8-unit building, the impact fees for sewer, water, police, fire, library, anything they can stuff in there is probably as much as $2,500 to $5,000 per unit. So when you pick up your building permit, you not only got to pay for the permit, you got to pay for all these impact fees that they're getting up front. Because they say, at least that's what they indicate, that this money is used for future, because the fire station's already built. But when are they going to need another one? And they blame us, actually, to a certain degree, because we're bringing in that 8 family, so they need more items that they have to plan for the future schools, whatever it is. But those are absolutely horrendous, and they vary from village to village, city to city. It just depends on what they think they might need. So that's something, but that's more of a localized thing. I'm trying to think if there's any federal impact fees, but I don't think there is.
Do you have any examples over the years of, Clinton changed to Bush, Bush changed to X, that, the change between a Democrat and a Republican really had a specific, change on the industry? Any example?
Well, probably the greatest one for me was Carter to Reagan. That was horrendous. Because back when Carter was in, the inflation was out of control, just like it's been here for Biden. I mean, those two parallel, in my opinion, quite a bit. And interest rates had to go up in order to pay for the time when Carter was in, so that inflation was able to be paid as time went on. When you buy materials, if inflation, you couldn't depend. Perfect example. Almost every builder, or not every subcontractor in the city, would tell you something like, "Ken, I'll supply this lumber for you for $10,000." But that's today. If you want to build, if you're not going to take delivery of that lumber until 2 months from now, I can't begin to tell you what it's going to cost. Well, you can't plan on building anything with that kind of knowledge.
Right.
I mean, it was insane. And as soon as Reagan got in there, then he went into Reaganomics, and he I believe that he was the one that was in charge of raising the interest rates, because what he was trying to do is get the interest rates to get rid of the high inflation, so that lumber salesman could say, I'll charge you $10,000 for this lumber, and I'll hold the price for 6 months. Because he knew that inflation was getting under control if it wasn't. And so therefore, they could guarantee the price for a lot longer.
Yeah, and maybe hopefully make some money in the middle of that time as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. All right. Well, to switch a little bit back to real estate, what are some of the really key lessons that you've learned about constructing or even managing the properties along the way?
Well, let's see. There's probably so many, but I can't.
Or we can switch. Here's a different question altogether. Did you have a mentor along the way?
Not for the building of buildings. No, I didn't. I never worked for anybody else once I got out of college. All of my mentors, it's kind of interesting, were what I would refer to as negative mentors. A positive one would be where a young man gets taught by an older man, and they work together hand in hand, and they teach and they learn and they study. And one that's negative is where you watch what this person did or does, and you realize that it wasn't good, and you did the opposite. And I basically had 3 of them. One was my father, and he was a negative person, but he was a negative mentor in the fact that he wanted me to do nothing the way he did it. He tried to build he bought a duplex, and it didn't work like it was supposed to. And so he insisted that I start my own business as soon as I could. And that was a positive thing, but the negative part was the fact that he couldn't do this on his own, and it was kind of sad. Then I had another cousin, in fact, that wanted to have fast cars and get into trouble and do this and do that. And I could see that if I followed that mentor, it was going to be nothing but trouble and I'd never get anywhere. And the third one was another cousin that I worked for who he was an introverted guy when he was at a distance, what we refer to today as telephone tough guys. But he was Casper Milquetoast when he was there with you. And I just saw how he treated people that worked for him. And I made a decision that I was never going to do those kind of things, as long as I was in business. So the three that I had as mentors, again, were what you'd call negative mentors.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Why did your father's duplex not work?
I don't know. It's pretty. Excuse me. I was pretty young. I was probably only like 10. I don't remember. It was in where was it at? 27th and Forest Home, which even to this day is the best area in Milwaukee Metro, as far as I know. And I think he just had bad experiences with people moving in and not paying, because for him it was a after work kind of thing, So it was a lot of work and it just didn't work out. It's kind of like if you're going to do something, you got to do it.
Yeah, do it all the way.
Mm-hmm.
So the negative mentors, I understand, they kind of persuaded you to essentially not do the things that they did.
Correct.
But on the other side, going through this with, you had your associate's degree, you had high school, of course, no actual office jobs or anything like that in your life. I mean, how did you learn all the ins and outs of the operation, especially, going from a little to a lot in a 4-year period?
School of Hard Knocks. It was ridiculous. I mean, I was learning so fast that I wouldn't even be able to predict what was going to be next. And it wasn't an easy time, but I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew that if I continued to try and worked hard and watched the money and didn't waste it, that I could get there. And there's I forgot what I was going to say. Anyway, it was a time when things were growing so fast that it was hard to keep up. I worked a lot of late night hours. My kids would go to bed, and I'd stay up and do the paperwork until all hours. And my wife helped out too. She once she retired from her actual job, then she would do some paperwork with me.
And then, so your last child was born, let's see, then that was what, 85?
Yep.
85. And then you said you had 8 foster kids along the way. Was that when you had your kids as well, or was that after 85 that you and your wife started to do that? Or how did you begin to take in foster kids and have 8?
Well, they were never there. It was only, the most that was there any one time was 2.
Okay.
And they were 2 brothers, and they came to us when they were 2 and 1. It was after our kids were born that we started with it, and I forgot that. I think it was through Lutheran Social Services or something like that. They're the ones that we got in touch with. I'm not sure exactly. I don't remember back then. I mean, most of them are 25 years old or 35 by now.
Do you still keep in touch with them?
Only 2.
Only 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
One's a girl from Oconomowoc, and the other one's a boy that came from Cudahy.
And what made you and your wife start taking in foster kids?
Well, she had a kind of an interesting, what you would call a youth, I guess. Her aunt and uncle raised her from the time she was 7, I think. And so this was that was a prelude toward her attitude about giving back to other people who weren't as fortunate as what we ended up to be.
But your wife didn't grow up in luxury or anything to that amount by any means, right?
No. In fact, she probably wouldn't even want me to tell people this. She was raised in a little town in southwestern Wisconsin near Spring Green. And they had a square, I don't know what it's even called, tub, I guess, wash tub. They had a square wash tub that they would put in the kitchen and bring in buckets of hot water and buckets of cold water. And they'd get in this hot tub or this tub and wash themselves, and they'd carry the water out of the tub into the sink and do the reverse. That's how they took baths.
Wow.
Didn't even have a bathtub. So yeah, she came from pretty, but they lived that way. And her aunt was just a great person. Great. She had 6 kids of her own, and she raised 4 more from other people's families. So she was a good woman.
So Bobby's aunt was probably her mentor along the way in
Yeah.
terms of what she's done for people.
Yeah.
And for those of you that don't know Bobby, Bobby is an incredible woman. She'll do anything for anybody. It's sometimes we even laugh at it and make fun of that kind of things because she does just absolutely so much. She's great. Is there from a family perspective, what you're kind of an interesting guy because you have opinions on everything, but you somewhat keep them to yourself. I mean, when it comes to what your kids do or even what your kids' spouses do or anything like that, you don't talk bad about them or talk down to them or tell them what to do or, anything to that effect. I never hear you doing that. You kind of just stay out of things.
Yeah.
Right? Has that been like your mentality parenting your entire life, or have you learned that along the way, or I guess why are you like that?
Good question. I think I learned most of it along the way because I could see what I thought was beneficial in how to do things with the kids and what to not to do, and just to be there as much as I could. I was one of the only, or one of the first, what do they call them, room father. At the grade school, I would go on all their field trips, Christmas parties, whatever the case may be. I just tried to do things with them. And yeah, it's been an interesting ride. And Bobby and I pretty much agree on ways that we were going to do it. Obviously, I always lost if there was a conflict, which is probably true more often than not. And I didn't object to the foster kids. I really had very minimal to do with them. I have more to do with this one kid that's still around. He's like 34 years old. And but the other ones were babies. They were only a day old.
How long did you have them for?
Well, the longest one's been forever. And the other one was probably 2 years. And then after that, it ranged anywhere from 6 weeks to about 6 months. Then they'd be handed over to the adopting parents.
Okay, so you were kind of the
Bridge parents, they called us.
bridge parents.
Yeah,
Okay.
between the real parent or whatever it's called, biological parent, and the adopting parent. And these people, the adopting parents would come out on weekends, and they couldn't take the kids, but they could stay at our house if we let them. And so we always induced them to stop out for a couple hours on Sunday or something. And some of them were very interesting, some of them were very quiet, some were more involved. One guy would make us supper. Can't object to that.
Yeah, right. Interesting. Is there anything, any really large lessons learned throughout that? Throughout the course of the family or the foster kids staying in and out of homes?
Just to listen, I think, more than anything, which isn't a real heavily used benefit today. It seems like nobody listens. Everybody's got their head in their phone or someplace else. But yeah, I mean, they even talk about to this day, the girls, how I would make agreements with them. I'd actually put it in writing. So we had a method of following through with grades, if they were below average or below where we wanted them to be, and what they have to do after to get them up, and then what was the benefit once they did get them up. I remember making a contract with middle daughter for grades, alcohol, made contracts with them for that. I don't know. It just kind of worked.
And you don't drink anymore. I mean,
No.
I haven't seen you drink. I've been
My
with
kids
your
have
daughter
never
now.
seen. And one's 40. How old is she? 44, I guess she must be. And none of them have ever seen either one of us drunk.
Yeah, I've seen you take a sip of a beer here and there, but I've never seen you
Right.
drink an actual beer or anything
Yeah.
like that this whole time.
Yeah.
What led to that?
Owning my own business, I couldn't imagine what it would be like if I would have hurt somebody or killed somebody and got a drunk driving ticket. You know, owning my own business. And nowadays, people shrug off everything. But back in the real days, back in the olden days,
The real days.
yeah, they people didn't just shrug things off. They held you liable and responsible for your decisions. And so I just figured it wasn't worth it and decided to quit.
But you were a bit of a party animal when you were young. Right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I had an accident, should have been dead, but I wasn't. I didn't hurt anybody else. It was a single car accident. That was part of the reasoning for deciding to just quit. And the other thing was, I found out that I didn't really enjoy it, especially the morning after. I mean, you get hangovers, and it's just, you have to look at it and say, I'm going to be miserable until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I only was out having fun for 2 hours. The benefit and the cause just didn't seem to pan out.
Right.
That's pretty much the reason. Yeah, Bobby just, well, she never really, even back when we were younger, she drank quite a bit less, I would say, from what I remember.
Yeah. Interesting. What role did religion play in your life?
Well, that's probably fairly negative from the time I was 14 until at least 16 or 18. I went to a public school for 9 years out of my life, and then my parents decided, good thing they're dead, they can't listen to this, that it was my turn to go to parochial school because my two sisters graduated from parochial school. And that was probably one of the most detrimental things that they could have ever done to me because I didn't really know that much about religion and so on, and so I was actually failing. And if there's anything that I'm not accustomed to, it's failing. And so it was a very turmoil part of my life, my freshman and sophomore years of high school, until I finally got the nerve to ask my mother if I could just quit going to the parochial school and go back to where I belonged in the public school system, and they agreed, which I'm grateful. And so I went from failing to being on the honor roll all within a month. So it turned out to be a beneficial decision on their part, to allow me.
Was that because of just the religious classes, or?
Exactly.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. So
Wow.
I hated it. Absolutely hated it. And we took our daughters to Sunday school. They didn't go to parochial school. They went to public school all their life because I just couldn't, I don't know what, forgive or something. And I wasn't totally taking responsibility for my own actions or inactions. And so now the grandchildren, as you know, go to parochial school, which I fought against, I don't know, 10 years ago when the first one was born. But now I agree that it's extremely beneficial. It's a different time. Parochial schools actually, I believe, have a different purpose today than what they did 40 years ago, just because we live in such a crazy environment. So I think it's more of a requisite that they go to a different school than a public school. And there's other public schools around yet that are still very good. In fact, I'm a real proponent of charter schools. It's the only thing that makes any sense. And a parochial school is somewhat equal to a charter school in the fact that they can set their own agenda, I think, to a certain degree, and they can switch teachers around if they aren't working properly or if they're not following the same agenda that the school wants them to do. Whereas you take a public school teacher, they got to do everything short of raping somebody before they fire them.
Right.
And it just doesn't seem like a good way to raise a kid. I mean, we're lucky. We got 4 grandchildren, and they're all perfect. You know, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I can see you getting emotional by this.
Yeah, very much so.
And that's something that I look up to you for. I mean, I've seen you get emotional before about things, and I think it's great. I mean, it shows how much you care about everyone and your kids, your grandkids, everyone else. Fantastic thing to see. But getting back to the religious part, when you were younger, and I know you didn't. I understand the parochial school and failing within parochial school. Were you spiritual? Were you guided by God? Did God play a part in your life? And if not, when did He start, or has He ever started to?
I would say that it really didn't. It really didn't start with me until later. I even to this day wouldn't consider myself to be overly religious, and I've said to my wife 100 times that I don't know how I got so lucky without having God in my life to do as well off and to be as healthy and physical and smart and all that without really having God in my life as much as I do now. And I really can't say that even to this day, am a very parochial person. I believe that you need to live it rather than show it. And so that's kind of the theory that I go with.
Oh, that's great. All right, well why don't we take a break here? It's getting a little heavy, so we'll take a break and we'll see if we come back either a little bit later or tomorrow or what. But so far, this has been really good. I have a lot more questions for you.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you for joining.